Have you ever wondered how our brain processes information? How it manages to remember vast amounts of details? Today, we're diving into the fascinating world of cognitive strategies. Imagine a library where books are neatly organized, making it easier to find exactly what you're looking for. Now, imagine your brain working in a similar way, systematically sorting and storing information. Intriguing, isn't it? This process is called chunking, and it's a core part of how our brains manage information. Chunking in psychology is a cognitive strategy that involves breaking down large amounts of information into smaller, manageable chunks or units. Imagine trying to remember a long string of numbers. It's quite challenging, isn't it? But what if you break that string into smaller groups? Suddenly, it becomes much more manageable. That's chunking. It's like the compartments in a bento box, each holding a different part of your meal, yet together they make up a satisfying lunch. Similarly, chunking organizes our thoughts, making it easier for our brains to process and remember information. When we learn, our brains encode and store information. Chunking aids this process by reducing cognitive load, making it easier to retain information. It's like taking an elevator instead of climbing a steep flight of stairs. So by organizing information into meaningful chunks, we can focus on understanding and memorizing smaller interconnected concepts rather than trying to tackle a large amount of material all at once. Now, how does chunking work in real life, you may ask? Well, let's dive into a few examples to illustrate this concept more vividly. Imagine you're learning a new language. You could try to memorize every single vocabulary word individually. But that's like trying to eat a whole cake in one bite. It's overwhelming and not particularly effective. Instead, chunking involves grouping words that are related in meaning or usage. You might start with vocabulary related to food, apples, oranges, bread, milk. Then move on to words associated with travel, airplane, ticket, suitcase, hotel. And perhaps later you focus on words for daily activities, waking, eating, working, sleeping. By learning in these chunks, your brain can more easily remember and recall these words when needed. It's like eating that cake slice by slice, much more manageable and enjoyable, right? Now let's take a different scenario. Say you're tackling a complex concept or procedure, like a challenging mathematical problem or a series of historical events. If you try to understand it all at once, it can be like trying to climb a mountain in a single leap. But with chunking, you break down that mountain into smaller hills. For the math problem, you might break it into smaller components, solving each part before moving on to the next. For the historical events, you might organize them into chronological chunks, breaking down centuries into decades, years, and even specific dates. By tackling each chunk individually, you're able to gradually build up your understanding and form a coherent picture of the whole. It's like climbing that mountain one step at a time, making the journey more manageable and ultimately more successful. So, can you see how chunking works? Whether we are learning new words in a foreign language, solving complex problems, or trying to understand historical events, we can use chunking to break down large amounts of information into manageable, meaningful units. Chunking, therefore, is not just a concept, but a practical tool that we use, often without realizing it, in our everyday learning. So, what are the benefits of using this chunking strategy, you might ask? Well, sit tight, because the advantages are quite impressive. Firstly, chunking enhances comprehension. By breaking down large amounts of information into smaller, interrelated chunks, we're able to understand each piece of information in context. This way, we're not just memorizing facts, but we're understanding how these facts relate to each other, giving us a deeper comprehension of the topic at hand. Secondly, chunking improves retention. It's easier for our brains to remember information when it's organized into manageable chunks. Think of it like a puzzle. It's much easier to assemble when you group the pieces by color or pattern. Similarly, when we group related information together, it becomes easier for our brains to store and retain that information for later use. Lastly, chunking enhances recall. When we need to retrieve information from our memory, it's much easier to do so if that information is organized in a meaningful way. By chunking, we create mental shortcuts that allow us to recall information more quickly and accurately. When we put all these benefits together, it's clear that chunking has a significant impact on effective learning outcomes. It's not just about memorizing facts or concepts, but about understanding, remembering, and recalling information in a way that is meaningful and efficient for us. With chunking, the brain can process and remember information more efficiently, leading to more productive learning. So, why not give chunking a try the next time you're faced with a large amount of information to learn? In summary, chunking is a powerful cognitive strategy that our brains use to process information. It's a method that takes the seemingly insurmountable mountain of data we often face and breaks it down into smaller, more manageable hills. By doing so, it allows us to navigate the rocky terrain of learning with relative ease. Let's circle back to the key points we've discussed. We've explored how chunking works, taking large amounts of information and dividing it into smaller, interconnected units. This process not only makes the information easier to digest, but also makes it more meaningful. The brain is, after all, a pattern-recognizing machine. It thrives on connections and associations. We've looked at real-life examples of chunking in action. From learning new languages to understanding complex concepts, chunking proves its worth. It allows us to group related vocabulary words together, learning them as a collective rather than as isolated units. It aids us in breaking down complex processes into smaller, more digestible steps, fostering a deeper understanding and building upon our knowledge progressively. Not to be overlooked are the numerous benefits of chunking. It enhances comprehension, making information more accessible and understandable. It boosts retention, helping to secure information in our memory for the long haul. And it improves recall, enabling us to retrieve information when we need it. All of these factors contribute to more effective learning outcomes, but perhaps the most powerful aspect of chunking is its versatility. It's not confined to a classroom or a textbook. It can be applied to any situation where there's a wealth of information to be absorbed. Whether you're studying for a test, learning a new skill, or even navigating a new city, chunking can be your secret weapon. So the next time you're faced with a huge amount of information to remember, try chunking. It's a small strategy with a big impact.